I think the thing about dialogue is if you're going to write funny dialogue, which I like to do, because Olivia, she's imperfect, right? She's perfect for us. She's like plump, hysterically funny, a great friend, like the person I love, So I wanted to be like that, but then you have to have funny dialogue. She has to be funny. The only way I've found to do that is constantly reading people who are much funnier than I am. So I reread Oscar Wilde every year. I reread, like when I was writing Beauty and the Beast, which has got the House character in it, I read 6 years of scripts of House. And those scriptwriters, they're all online if you want to read them. Absolutely brilliant understanding of timing and jokes. And so basically, for that one, I was deep into Blackadder. Anyone ever? I mean, you've probably seen it, right? It's great. You read the scripts of Blackadder, then you're actually seeing the jokes like on the page. So I would go read some Blackadder, which obviously is like profane and no connection to the book whatsoever. But read somebody or those people who are incredibly funny, go back and try again. I learned how to write novellas from her, Connie, because my first novella I was like, what am I doing? And Connie said, it's the most intense slice of life in your entire life. So when you're lying in the hospice, God forbid, but let's face it, we're all going there, and you look back, what are the 3 days that you will remember with the most joy, right, in your whole life? And those are the ones that you want to take with you, the memories you're going to bring with you. And so that was great advice. And so I'm writing along in The Wallflower, and the only problem with that is unless you watch it, the only thing you're remembering are the happy days, which makes for a really boring novella. So she needed to have some darkness. But I couldn't put it in the novella because you only have 120 pages. So you don't have time for someone to lose someone they deeply love now. It had to be 14 years in the past, but still have that oomph, right? Okay. I grew up on a farm, and our prom party was in a gravel pit. And I come by my love of rich dukes, honestly. That's where it is. My dad was a poet. Let's not even talk about the annual, salary of a poet. So I would say that my favorite of my many, many dukes actually is the character that I just talked about, Rupert. Rupert is not the hero of The Duke Is Mine, but one of my children had a difficult birth and was born at 24 weeks, and we were told that she might be limited in her intellectual grasp. And so I wanted to write a book in which he could be as heroic and everyone would know and accept and respect him for that. And I learned a lot writing that book. Sometimes the hardest characters are the ones that you yourself are afraid of. And because I lived with that fear, and it's absolutely not true, by the way, she speaks 2 languages and she's great, but we dodged a bullet. And if you're afraid, sometimes the best books come out of where your fear is. So for me, it was very cathartic writing that. I would say that my favorite heroine is, and this is just my bad memory, but I'm writing a book right now that's just done, and it's called The Ugly Duchess, and it comes out next fall. And she is fabulous. She is ugly, right? So you have a choice if you're writing something like that. Is she going to be like kind of homely, and then she gets a facelift? I mean, I can't do that, right? So she really has a mannish look, and that's the way it's going to be. And she is the strongest, fiercest, and one of the funniest characters I've ever known. And she reshapes herself a la Chanel. So she comes up with a lot of rules for how you should dress, such as consider the clergy. Because clergymen have those fabulous robes. And she's like, lace is for baptism. In other words, not for you. So she's at the moment, definitely my favorite heroine. Well, my husband's a professor, right? Medieval literature, Dante, and he's Italian, so he never heard of romance, actually. Never. And when I was like, well, this is what I'm writing, and I'm going to make enough money writing this so we can have another baby. And he was like, really? And then I remember him we were in the grocery store, and you know how they used to have romances right there where they have the magazines now? And he'd read my first one, and he was, let's just put it gently, appalled by the sex. Right? He was convinced. because that first book was called Potent Pleasures, and my husband's name is Alessandro, and so I wrote Alexander. And my husband at that point had black and white speckled hair, peppered hair, and so did my hero. And my hero had an Italian wine orchard, and that's where his family is in wine. Because, when you start out, you're not all that creative. My hero had annulled his first marriage on the grounds of impotence. Alessandro was convinced that every one of his colleagues would pick up this romance, decipher what was happening, and think that he was impotent. And I was like, Alessandro, for one thing, he wasn't really impotent, remember? And he's like, I don't care. It's close enough. So then he started going in the grocery store and looking at these books, and he would look for the sex scenes, right? So right there in the grocery store, he's like, look at this. This woman's mentioning way more body parts than you. And I was like, see, honey? And he's like, but her hero's not impotent. And, by now, the guy, the cashiers would be like, woo! So at some point, he kind of stopped reading them, and this has been sometimes a source of contention between us. But, my husband, I have to say, Christina's husband say, did I say that? My husband would look at a sex scene that was 4 hours on the stairs and say, we never did that. No, we didn't. So, and we're not going to. So I just let his reading slip into the past. That's been fine. I feel like this question may be like, you're a writer? So I'm just telling you right now, like, my process is not one to follow, right? I'm in her camp. I would say I'm like Lisa in that I start with a concept. So one really good example is Your Wicked Ways, because there I had the image of a man who is long separated from his wife, forever, and he's living with an opera singer, and his wife wants to have a baby. So she goes to him and she says, I'm going to have a baby. I want to have a baby. And he's like, well, fine, you can come on over. But I'm not leaving the house, and she's not leaving the house, right? Because I had friends who were going through infertility treatments at that point, and I was watching them with the manifest side effects of those treatments, thinking, what would she do to have that baby? Well, you know what? My friend would have been in that house. So my heroine was in the house. So the one image I had was the table, the dining room table, and he's at the top, and the mistress is there, and she's here. And she says to the mistress, well, if you don't mind, I'll borrow him tonight, but if I remember correctly, it's only 5 minutes. And the mistress says, on a good night, 10. Because the thing for me is I needed a moment that's an entire challenge for me. Like, how am I going to turn that guy, the adulterous 5-minute miracle, into a hero? And you know what? It's one of my top-selling books. So I suggest if you haven't read Your Wicked Ways, get it, because I look at it and I think it's my most guy-like guy, because that's what guys are like, right? And they need to learn, and this guy learns. And, and I also marry off his girlfriend, with whom he had not slept in a long time. So whatever. But the part I would say don't follow it is that I like getting that image. But for me, if it's a writing day, I write 20 pages, and the next day I dump 10. Or I write 170 pages in which Georgiana is the heroine, and then I dump it and start all over with Olivia. And that drives my publisher crazy. That drives my family crazy. It drives me crazy. But I don't seem to be able to be creative without writing so much that I get to the moment where I'm creative, right? Because I get really boring. Like, I'm looking at them, I'm like, this is so boring. And then I just keep going, because I figure at some point I'll become creative. It's a terrible way to go, but.